ask Count Corla. I support this motion. I raised this matter with the Taoiseach last week. I requested an urgent independent review of the ambulance service. Since I highlighted the issue, I've been contacted by paramedics, by patients, medical professionals from every corner of the country. Story after story has been relayed to me, some through anger and some through tears, all of them through frustration and desperation. This service is in crisis, and I'm not so sure, Minister, that you or the HSE or those that are responsible for delivering the service are fully aware of the extent of the problem. This service is failing those who strive every hour of every day to provide emergency care. This service is failing men, women and children across the country. This service is failing, full stop. I could quote stories of the anguish and suffering being experienced by patients, and it would be a long list. But we all have heard them. Every public representative here has heard the stories emanating from the paramedics themselves, from the ambulance crews, and from the general public who have been affected by this problem. Most of these stories that we hear are heartrending. Each one is a catalogue of human suffering. The realities of our flawed national ambulance service cannot be allowed to become a vote-catching opportunity for any elected representative, including myself. We have a duty to demand that it be put right. This is our duty in the first instance as human beings, and secondly, as elected representatives. We cannot fail on this issue. This issue is too important, and failure is not an option. We must start to improve what is a substandard service, which is being experienced every single day by people everywhere. We have to tackle what is a national crisis by engaging with and listening to the frontline staff. We must ensure that those actually doing the job have the means, the structures, the conditions, the support and the cooperation to do the job safely and effectively. The words health and safety have become so much a part of everyday life that one wonders if they are now simply taken for granted. It is really ironic that paramedics, who are recognised globally as being amongst the most highly skilled medical professionals, it's ironic that health and safety regulations in their case is constantly ignored or sidelined. If an individual has a licence to drive a HGV vehicle, then they are obliged to obey the Road Safety Authority rules. These rules require a maximum of 4.5 hours driving, which must be followed by a 45-minute break. Their day must be no longer than 9 or 10 hours, with weekly and fortnightly limits to be observed. Weekend breaks are also enforced. A paramedic is expected to work 15 or 16-hour shifts without rest periods and with no enforced weekly breaks. Meal breaks can be requested but cannot be guaranteed. Eating food in an ambulance in the current COVID environment is not exactly a healthy practice. Yet this is the only option for paramedics as they travel the motorways. And as they travel those motorways, they pass numerous signs, big glowing signs which says, "Tiredness kills." A good work-life balance is long recognised as essential to healthy living. 57% of all paramedics' shifts do not finish on time. Nobody can predict which ones will form part of the 43% that might get home on time. This creates huge stress on families and on the well-being of the paramedics who are trying to do their best to be all things to all people. When I raised the current ambulance service debacle with the Taoiseach last week, in his response, he referred to pre-hospital emergency care. This is the primary function of paramedics who are licensed to practice by the Pre-Hospital Emergency Care Council. Countless lives have been saved because of their interventions, and we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. Their job should be complete when they arrive at an accident and emergency with a patient. The hospital staff should take over responsibility at that stage. But the reality is much more different. In recent years, the ambulance has become an extension of the emergency department. Crews are caring for patients in the ambulance for up to 5 and 6 hours because the receiving hospital staff have no place for the patient. This is not pre-hospital care. Minister, 3 things need to happen immediately, and these are 3 of just many actions that are battling for priority. Frontline paramedics must be taken off COVID testing. The ambulance service is already grossly understaffed. Highly skilled paramedics should not be diverted to COVID testing. The deployment of the new interns due out of training schools needs to be monitored carefully. I would request that interns would be placed as close as is practical to their homes or their localities. As you know, interns are on very poor wages. They get no travel or accommodation allowance. And I know several interns who are based in Tipperary travelling on a daily basis because it's cheaper for them to travel to West Cork. They could leave Tipperary at 10, 11 o'clock at night and report back for duty again the morning after at 8 o'clock. It's simply unfair and unjust to treat young people like that, and it's happening on a regular basis. I would also agree that paramedics need to have NASRA recognised as their union of choice. This group was formed by paramedics to be their independent voice. They were initially recognised, but the HSC withdrew this recognition. And Minister, I would like if you would enlighten us as to why this recognition was granted and then withdrawn. These paramedics and ambulance crew feel very strongly that their views are not represented adequately, and they feel that there's a conflict in that the union who's currently representing them is also representing the management of the HSE. And I feel that this should be recognised and reflected in the decision of the Minister. Minister, the lid has been blown off the pathetic state of the ambulance service. That lid can never be allowed to close again until the voices of those who work in and depend on the National Ambulance Service are both heard and heeded. The problems in our ambulance service are compounded and exacerbated by a general malaise in our healthcare system. The Minister, in his reply this evening, mentioned the lack of acute beds. And there is an urgent need for a significant increase in bed capacity. For instance, last week we had Taoiseach got a very warm welcome on his visit to open a new 40-bed unit in South Tipperary University Hospital. His visit was well received by both the management and by the staff, and indeed by the patients across Tipperary. The only one, in fact, I don't see him tonight, and I wish him well. The only note of hostility was from Deputy Matty McGrath, who didn't want to see the Taoiseach in the hospital or in the constituency. But what I would ask is, the Taoiseach in his tour of that hospital saw a 39-bed unit, which is, already has 2 million spent on it, and an additional 5 million would make available 39 additional beds, and I would ask that that gets priority.